Right then, let's have a proper chat about something you face every single day on site, usually without giving it a second thought. And I'm going to speak up, just in case. Think about the noise you encounter on site. Maybe you've got a pile driver working over to one side of you. Then there's the violent, ear-splitting burst of a hydraulic breaker tearing through reinforced concrete. And underneath it all, that relentless, low-frequency diesel generator hum that seems to vibrate through the very soles of your boots. As industry professionals, you know those sounds inside out. They're the soundtrack of your existence. You know the decibel limits, you know the exposure action values, and we've all stuffed those little yellow foam earplugs into our ears more times than we can count. Job done. Safety box ticked. Move on to the next task. Except it's not. When we talk about sight noise, the conversation almost always stops at the ear. We measure the decibels in the air, we guess how much the earplugs are muffling the din, and we leave it at that. That view is dangerously wrong. The harsh reality is that high-intensity noise is a brutal, systemic stressor. It's a cognitive pollutant. That acoustic energy doesn't just bounce off your eardrums. It permeates your entire body. It infiltrates your cardiovascular system, rewires your neural pathways, and completely wrecks your ability to think straight. So let's pull back the curtain on what this racket is actually doing to your body. I'm going to start at the cellular level. To understand the real damage, we need to look past the mechanical bits of the ear and zoom right inside your skull. Inside your inner ear, you have thousands of tiny, fluid-bathed hair cells. Think of them like a lush field of grass. When normal sound waves come in, they sway gently in the breeze. But when you fire up a hydraulic hammer or a concrete crusher, they're hit with a sonic hurricane. That intense acoustic energy violently shears and bends those delicate cells. The outer hair cells take a massive beating, which instantly drops your ability to amplify sound and pushes your hearing thresholds right up. However, the physical flattening of those microscopic hairs is just the opening salvo, because your ear is working flat out to process that continuous, deafening roar. Its metabolic activity goes into overdrive. This massive overexertion generates a sudden surge of something called reactive oxygen species, basically a flood of cellular toxins. Your inner ear enters a state of severe stress, literally cooking its own cellular structures from the inside out. Keep subjecting yourself to that day after day, and the nerves connecting your ear to your brain begin to wither and die. And worse still, it damages the blood vessels supplying the auditory system, starving it of oxygen and ensuring that whatever hearing you've lost is never, ever coming back. But the brain doesn't take this silence lying down. When those nerves go dark and stop sending signals, your brain gets confused. It tries to compensate for that missing sensory input by cranking up its own internal volume. It goes into a state of neural hyperactivity. In the real world, we call that tinnitus. It's that persistent, maddening phantom sound, a ringing, buzzing, or rushing in your ears when everything outside is actually quiet. It affects roughly 7% of our workforce. And if you talk to the lads who have it, they'll tell you that the phantom sound is far worse than the actual hearing loss. It's a relentless, uninvited internal distraction. It ruins your sleep, drives up chronic anxiety, and makes it incredibly difficult to concentrate on a complex site drawing or a technical briefing. But if you think the damage is confined to your head, think again. Those acoustic shockwaves travel deep into your body, acting as a direct trigger to your nervous system. The moment sight noise climbs past 80 decibels, which is basically every single demolition site in existence, your body registers that high-intensity sound as an immediate physical threat. It triggers your fight or flight response, completely against your will. Your brain thinks you're in imminent danger, so it floods your bloodstream with a continuous drip of stress hormones, adrenaline, and cortisol. Living in a permanent state of psychological high alert wreaks absolute havoc on your heart. Research shows a clear, direct line between a long-term hazardous noise exposure and hypertension, irregular heartbeats, and severe cardiovascular disease. Your blood vessels are incredibly sensitive to this acoustic stress. For every 10 decibels increase in long-term noise exposure on the job, your risk of suffering a stroke or dying from one takes a measurable leap upward. To make matters worse, our working environments love to multiply the dangers. When researchers looked at how different site stressors interact, they found a deadly synergy between the noise and temperature. If you're out on a freezing cold site in January, your blood vessels are already constricted to keep you warm. Throw hazardous noise into that mix, and the combined thermal and acoustic stress places an exceptional burden on your heart, drastically elevating the risk of a fatal heart attack on site. By using EEG technology to look at brainwaves, scientists can see exactly how industrial noise messes with your grey matter. Your brain operates on different frequencies: alpha waves for relaxed wakefulness, and beta waves for sharp concentration, and theta waves when you're getting drowsy. Sight noise completely disrupts these neural circuits, and it does so in two distinct ways depending on the type of noise. First, you have complex noise. This is the unpredictable, highly variable banging and crashing, a hydraulic breaker striking concrete or materials being dropped into a metal skip. Because that sound is unpredictable, your brain can't get used to it. Every single time that hammer strikes unexpectedly, your brain is forced to hijack its own cognitive resources to process that sudden noise. That shatters your working memory and your concentration. Your reaction times drop through the floor and your error rates spike, which is the last thing you want when making critical safety decisions. And then second, you have steady noise. That's the constant, predictable drone of a compressor or a generator. Now, your brain can adapt to that to some degree. You might feel like you've tuned out the hum, but that filtering comes at a massive biological cost. Your brain has to work incredibly hard behind the scenes to block out that continuous noise, burning up its energy reserves and leaving you with deep, chronic mental fatigue by the end of the shift. Your brain's energy allocation gets completely disrupted, meaning that while you might not feel actively distracted by that generator, your mental stamina is being quietly bled dry. And once those noise levels climb past the 80 decibel mark, the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for executive function, logic, and attention, takes a massive hit. Attention drops, mental stress skyrockets, and your overall ability to learn and adapt on site is severely degraded. The fallout from this cognitive damage inevitably spills into the worker's personal life, creating a devastating social ripple effect. It starts with a spiral of isolation. Noise-induced hearing loss makes it incredibly hard to pick out speech, especially those high-frequency consonant sounds like T, D, and S. It leads to embarrassment, knocked self-esteem, and constant friction. The natural response? Workers start to withdraw. They pull away from their mates on site and from their families at home, leading to increased irritability, aggression, and even profound loneliness. And the long-term neurological cost of that isolation is terrifying. Midlife hearing loss is now recognized as the single highest risk factor for developing dementia. Just a mild case of occupational hearing loss doubles your risk of dementia later in life. If you have severe hearing loss from a career of unprotected exposure, your risk of cognitive decline and dementia increases by a staggering factor of 5. The socio-economic numbers are just as sobering. Statistically, people with occupational hearing damage face a much higher chance of unemployment or being forced into early retirement. Back on site, this loss of function creates an immediate safety nightmare. Workers who rely on basic passive earmuffs to block out the noise lose all their situational awareness. They can't hear spatial cues, they can't hear environmental warnings, and they can't tell which direction a piece of heavy plant is approaching from. You're effectively working blind or deaf in a high-risk environment. The data proves it. High levels of noise-induced hearing damage literally doubles the rate of accident-related injuries on site. When you look at the hard data, it becomes glaringly obvious that acoustic hazards are far more dangerous than we give them credit for. Noise is a comprehensive workplace pollutant that does most of its damage entirely out of sight. That massive acoustic energy generated during demolition doesn't just vanish into thin air, it's absorbed directly by the human body. It triggers cellular destruction in your inner ear, sends stress hormones coursing through your veins, and completely fractures your ability to focus and think. From the death of vital neurons and the hardening of your arteries to the erosion of your mental stamina and the acceleration of long term cognitive decline, the true cost of sight noise is carved deeply into the health of our workforce. That deafening clamour of the site leaves a destructive imprint on your body, and it keeps echoing long after the machinery has been switched off at the end of the day.